Hi, in the last couple of videos we've been talking about establishing some habits that will allow us to identify people that God is drawing, people that God is calling to himself. The first of those is to pray for people, to pray for 5 people who are close to us but far from God, and to do that every day. The next is to pray with people, to listen for when our friends, our neighbors, our workmates express a need or a problem, and then just offer to pray out loud with them about that problem and watch how they respond. And from their response, we're going to be able to start to identify if there's somebody who's interested in learning more about God or not. The third, is one I'm going to call gatepost statements, and you'll understand why in a minute. It comes from Deuteronomy chapter 6. And the idea is that we need to learn to express ourselves as we go through life in a way that identifies us as a person who really, really loves God. So let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 to 9. I'm reading here in the New Living Translation. Here's what it says. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home, when you're on the road, when you're going to bed, and when you're getting up. Tie them on your hands. Wear them on your foreheads as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates or on your gateposts. And I want you to notice a couple things here. First is that the fundamental characteristic that identifies God's people is love. God's people love God a lot. And they are committed to obeying his commandments. And that is to permeate their whole lives. It's to be expressed when we're getting up, when we're walking on the road, when we're in the home, when we're going to bed, when we're at work, wherever. Our love for God and our commitment to follow him should just show up in everything. And let's focus for a minute on verses 8 and 9. He says, tie them to your hands, wear them on your foreheads, write them on the doorpost, and write them on your gates. So if you tie something on your hand, who sees it? You do. And you tie things on your hand, or I used to write notes on my hand to remind myself. If you tie something on your forehead, who sees it? Not you, except when you're looking in the mirror, but the person who sees it is the person who's talking to you. In other words, my love for God, my commitment to follow him, should be evident to the people I'm talking with. Now, if I put it on my doorpost, who sees that? Well, anyone who comes in and out of my house sees that. So when someone comes to visit me, to visit my family, they should say, this is a family that really loves God, that honors him. And if I put it on my gatepost, who sees that? People walking by on the street. So as people walk by on the street, they should be able to say, that's a family that really loves God. Now, Orthodox Jews follow that very, very literally, which is they take a scroll containing God's commands and they tie it on their forehead or they put it in their doorpost. But I want to ask another question, which is, how can we apply this, not by putting a scroll of the Torah in our doorpost, but how can we go through our lives in a way that the people who see us, the people who come into our house, the people we interact with, that those people will be able to know, that is a person who really, really loves God. And let's go through an exercise. I want you first to think about what are 2 or 3 questions that you get asked all the time. Okay, just stop. Write down 2 or 3 questions that you get asked all the time. How are you? What do you do for a living? How are the kids? How's it going with the coronavirus? Right? Those are questions you get asked all the time. Choose 2 or 3 of them that are very common for you and think about how can you respond to those questions in a way that show that you are a person who really, really loves God. Now, I want you to be careful because it's very easy in this divisive culture to respond in ways not that invite, but in ways that divide. And so, for example, if somebody says, "What did you do Sunday?" and you said, "I went to church and listened to the teaching of God's word." Well, a Christian understands that because, oh, yeah, he's one of me. But a person who's not a believer doesn't necessarily think, oh, that's a person who loves God. They might think, oh, that's a church person. He's one of those. And I want you to think about how to ask these questions in a way that are really inviting. I'll just give you a couple of examples in my own life. Questions that I get asked all the time are, what do you do for a living? Well, I could say, I'm a missionary. And that will tend to label me, will tend to divide. Instead, I say, I help people start little groups with their friends and family where they learn together from the Bible and really help each other to put it into practice. Or somebody might ask, how's your kids? And I think, oh man, it's been so interesting because I've been watching God bring into their lives the things that they need. Some of them difficult, some of them good, but exactly what they need to become the person they're meant to be. It's beautiful. One of my favorite gatepost statements I've heard recently was from my wife. Somebody asked her, oh, how are you doing with the coronavirus? She said, oh, I'm grateful God is in control because it doesn't seem like anybody else is. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause this video. I want you to list 2 or 3 questions that you get frequently asked, and then write out a response. How can you respond to that question in a way that identifies you, not as a church person, not as an evangelical, but as a person who really, really loves God? Okay, you done? You got those 2 or 3 responses, those 2 or 3 gatepost statements written down? Now, I want you to practice those. Have somebody ask you the question and just practice responding. Pause the video while you do that. Okay, your assignment for this week, next week, and the rest of your life is to respond to the questions you get asked in a way that shows that you are a person who really, really loves God. And the goal here isn't that somebody's going to go, oh, you love God? I want to accept Jesus into my heart. The goal is for you to start to watch how people respond, and by that you'll be able to see, is this a person who God is drawing that I need to pursue further with the gospel?